We are beginning section 57 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We speak about add-ons, which means that you thought you were done, but now you decide that you actually want to eat some more. Let's see how that affects our brachas. Before we start, let's just pause for a moment to see where we're up to. This is the whole of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and just a little bit of a table of contents through the order of time, but we've given a significant amount of time to brachos. In fact, there's about 15 sections on that. We're most of our way through. We're already on section 57 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and so we are almost finished the laws of brachos. And next up will be business ethics, the laws of business, which is something that very important for all of us to know. But now for section 57, it's a fairly simple section. The idea is like this. In the past, I've given the analogy of a banking section, that when you want to log onto your banking, originally you've got to make sure that you put in this password, or you do this, or you do that. And then once you log on, you're on until your session times out. Once your session times out, then you need to log back in again. And I thought that's a somewhat of an analogy for brachas that we make on food, that originally when we make the bracha, we need to have the food in our hands, at least in front of us. And then we make the bracha and we eat. For how long does that bracha last? What happens if afterwards we decide to eat something that we didn't plan on eating from the start? Do we need to make another bracha? So, if you've got authorization only for one transaction, well, you need to put in your PIN again if you want to make a different transaction because you didn't state it at the outset. So if when you made your bracha, you didn't have in mind to have this additional food, do you need to make another bracha, or is the food covered by the bracha you originally made? Now, where this topic is first discussed in Torah, it speaks about how pretty much when you made a bracha, it would only cover what you were planning to eat. And whatever you weren't planning to eat will require a bracha of its own. But nowadays, it kind of is the reverse. We really don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're eating. We think we had enough, but we want more. So nowadays, the general rule is that when we make a bracha, we have in mind that it will cover whatever will come our way. And if we have that in mind, then it kind of we've kind of put in a clause into our bracha that it will be applicable to all the foods, so we don't need to make another bracha, another one of the same bracha for additional food that comes to the table. So he speaks first about bread, and then fruits, and then in general the idea, if you're not quite sure what you had in mind, special foods, if you're invited out, or you're offered a drink. Let's go through the different scenarios quickly. So firstly, as far as bread is concerned, you made a bracha over the bread, you said Habaytzi lechem min haaretz, and you had no intention on eating more than the loaf of bread that was in front of you. So for example, you bought bread or you bought a roll and you thought that was that. But then you decide to eat more and you send someone to buy more of the same. Even if you still have the original loaf of bread in front of you, since when you made hamotzi at the outset, you did not intend on going to buy more bread, you thought that you bought enough. So if you do send somebody to buy more bread, or in modern technology, if you order bottles or 60/60 or Uber Eats, and they deliver, let's say, another pie of pizza, you order one pie, and now you decide that you want to order another pie of Habaytzi pizza. So you will need to make the very same bracha Habaytzi again, because when you originally acknowledged Hashem for what you were eating, you intended to only eat what you had. You didn't intend to eat what you don't have. So the fact that you're now deciding to eat more means that you should make another bracha. I was thinking, what about taking out of the freezer? Right, practical example. You have some bread in the freezer, and you take it out, and you put it in the oven, you warm it up, and then you're sitting by the table, and you're still hungry, and you decide that you want to take some more bread out of the freezer so that you can eat some more. Challah, whatever it is, pizza. So I would say in such an instance, you would not need to make another bracha. Why? Because nowadays, at least I'll talk for myself, even when I take bread out of the freezer, I still have in the back of my head that, if I'm still hungry, I'm going to take some more bread out of the freezer. So it's kind of like I had in mind. It's not quite like sending somebody to the store. I think, to go back to the store, that's really something you don't intend on doing when you sit down to eat or to send somebody to the store. But as far as taking a little bit more out of the freezer, I don't think you would need to make another bracha hamaitzi if you did that. So that's as far as bread is concerned. So yeah, the example he gives is if you have bread in the house, but you only cut up a certain amount of slices, and you ate up whatever you cut up, and now you want to slice some more, you would not need to make another bracha because you had in mind that if you need to cut up some more bread, then you would. And I imagine the same would apply to taking it out of the freezer today. That's as far as bread is concerned. As far as fruits, same idea. You made a bracha on fruit that you were eating, and then some more fruit is served. So if when you made the bracha, you had in mind that you're making a bracha Bayra Priya Eitz over this apple and whatever other fruits that will come your way. So again, then you've intended on the bracha, you've intended when making the bracha that the bracha will be not only on what's in front of you, but also on what's still coming your way. And so you won't need to make another bracha. But if you decisively decided that you are only eating one mango, and then you changed your mind, then you would need to make another bracha. But it would need to be a proper, firm resolution where not just like, yeah, I think I'll have one. No, that's fine. And then you change your mind a little bit later. I don't know if it ever happens. You're sitting by the table with your spouse. You want to eat anymore? No, this will be just fine. Well, actually, so in those scenarios, you would not need to make another bracha because even if you said that I don't need it and I don't want it and I have enough, you still do have in the back of your head that you can change your mind. Halacha number 3 and 5. So what happens if you didn't have in mind either way? So you had no thought one way or the other about eating something more. So you basically came home, you took a nachi out of the fridge or a tomato, cucumber, you made a bracha, Bayra Priya Eitz or Bayra Priya Adama, and you ate it. And then you decide, you know what, I'm still hungry, I'd like another one. So he says, if you still have some of the original food in front of you, then it's questionable whether the bracha extends itself since you didn't have it, you thought, you're not really sure what you had in mind. And I'll speak about this more clearly in a moment. But if the food was finished and you're not sure what you had in mind, then it's questionable, but even there, you wouldn't make another bracha. Practically speaking, for me and you nowadays, every time we make a bracha, we should have in mind that it's including whatever's coming our way. So even when you run to the fridge and you just grab a plum, you should have in mind that when you make the bracha by Priya Eitz, that this is both for this plum and whatever other plum I want to eat. In halacha number 4, he speaks about if you originally made a bracha on one type of fruit, and then they brought a much more special fruit to the table. Since it's a more special fruit, it will require a bracha of its own. However, others argue about this, and therefore they say here too, if you're eating, let's say you're making our eitz right now just on a piece of avocado, and soon there's going to be this exquisite, special prickly pear. So you have in mind at the start that when you make the bracha Bayra Priya Eitz, it will cover even that which is more special, and then you don't have any issues. So that's the general theme, that every time you make a bracha, you have in mind that it should cover everything that comes your way. Here's another scenario. If you had two things with the same bracha, but they're very different. One's a drink and one's a food, like you're having beer as well as some other type of food, and you're not quite sure what you had in mind. So if you originally made a bracha on your cup of beer, now they've brought in front of you something else that's shahakal mushrooms, and you're not quite sure what you had in mind, you would need to make a bracha on the mushrooms, even if the beer is still in front of you. because they're very different. But again, that's if you didn't have in mind clearly. If when you made the shahakal, you had in mind that this is both on the beer that I'm drinking and any other foods as brachas or shahakal, then you would not need to make another bracha. If you're invited out, here's an interesting one. It's hard to have in mind what you'll eat because you don't know what you're going to be served. So in such a scenario, we say that we don't follow what you have in mind, but we follow what the balabas has in mind. So practically, it means that your one bracha would be able to cover you for everything. And finally, in halacha number 7, if you were served a drink and you made a bracha over it, and then somebody offered you another drink, so although in Talmudic times it speaks about having to make another bracha for each drink because you didn't expect it, and so when you made the bracha, you thought it was your only drink you were being offered. Nowadays, people do expect to be offered multiple drinks, and therefore, again, when you make the bracha, it covers you. So with that, we'll conclude with the l'chaim, since we're speaking about the drinks. And the moral of the story is, every time you make a bracha, have in mind that it's including all the different food that might or might not be brought in front of you, and that way you will be covered. Thanks so much for joining, and wishing you a wonderful evening.